guys, this is Doug again from fellowshipofthemartyrs.com. We're continuing our series of idiots on the Bible. And not that they were idiots, they were men of God who God raised up and God used and God commends. In Hebrews, we were talking before, Hebrews chapter 11 in the Pantheon of Heroes, where they're commended for their faith. Let me read you that list again real quick if I can find it here. In Hebrews 11, we're talking about those who by faith acted, and the world was not worthy of them. The writer of Hebrews really waxes poetic about how great these guys are. And I'm just doing a series to kind of talk about how flawed they were. I don't want to diminish how the Lord used them. I don't want to diminish that, the point is that God uses flawed vessels. And then He doesn't really bring up again after the fact how flawed they were. He brings up what a great thing they did. And he talks specifically about Gideon, Barak, Samson, Jephthah, David, Samuel, and the prophets. That conquered kingdoms, administered justice, shut the mouths of lions, quenched the fury of the flames, escaped the edge of the sword, whose weakness was turned to strength. So, some people talk about their strength. I want to talk a little bit about their weakness, and how, if the Lord can turn the weakness into strength with those guys, what about you? What about some of the people that are out there now that you're condemning because they're not perfect, and yet the Lord's still going to use them? Anyway, so we're going to try and go through that list: Gideon, Barak, Samson, Jephthah, David. I want to talk about Samson right now. There's a lot of folks that don't know any of the stories in the Bible, and I want to just urge you again to just read the whole thing. But we're talking in Judges chapter 13 in the Old Testament. Before the kings of Israel, there were judges. And the Lord basically raised up men and sometimes women to be judges, to kind of administer justice and keep the peace and solve problems and speak the word of the Lord and everything. Now, in Judges chapter 13, we're talking about the birth of Samson. And this is fairly dramatic, so I want to include this and so you kind of know who he is and what he's about. Again, this is right after Jephthah. They fall away again. It says, again the Israelites did evil in the eyes of the Lord. So the Lord delivered them into the hands of the Philistines for 40 years. So there's this pattern over and over. They live at peace under one of the judges. They sin against God, and they're turned over to their enemies for, usually 40 years. One generation. A certain man of Zorah, named Manoah, from the clan of the Danites, had a wife who was sterile and remained childless. The angel of the Lord appeared to her and said, "You are sterile and childless, but you are going to conceive and have a son. Now see to it that you drink no wine or other fermented drink, and that you do not eat anything unclean, because you will conceive and give birth to a son. No razor may be used on his head, because the boy is to be a Nazirite, set apart to God from birth, and he will begin the deliverance of Israel from the hands of the Philistines." Okay, so they're being oppressed by the Philistines. Things are pretty bad. An angel shows up and says, "I know that you've never had a kid and that you're barren, but you're going to have a kid. Even while you're pregnant, don't have any alcohol and don't eat anything unclean, because he's dedicated to the Lord. He's supposed to be holy." We'll talk more about Nazirites and not cutting your hair some other time. Then the woman went to her husband and told him, "A man of God came to me. He looked like an angel of God, very awesome. I didn't ask him where he came from, and he didn't tell me his name, but he said to me, 'You will conceive and give birth to a son. Now then, drink no wine or other fermented drink, and do not eat anything unclean, because the boy will be a Nazirite of God from birth until the day of his death.'" So this isn't a choice. This isn't somebody that got to decide whether they wanted to serve the Lord or not. This kid, before he's even conceived, maybe, we're not sure at that point, but this kid's dedicated to the Lord. Then Manoah prayed to the Lord, "O Lord, I beg you, let the man of God you sent to us come again to teach us how to bring up the boy who is to be born." Now remember, all of Israel is going their own way, and they're getting oppressed by the Philistines, so there may not be any good role models for this kid, and the parents may not know how to raise up a Nazirite from birth. This is the only one that's really talked about, except John the Baptist and Jesus. God heard Manoah, and the angel of God came again to the woman while she was out in the field, but her husband Manoah was not with her. The woman hurried to tell her husband, "He's here, the man who appeared to me the other day." Manoah got up and followed his wife. When he came to the man, he said, "Are you the one who talked to my wife?" "I am," he said. Which is also, "I am." So Manoah asked him, "When your words are fulfilled," okay, that's not an if. When your words are fulfilled, when she has a kid, okay, there's faith right there being exhibited by the parents. "What is to be the rule for the boy's life and work?" The angel of the Lord answered, "Your wife must do all that I have told her. She must not eat anything that comes from the grapevine, nor drink any wine or other fermented drink, nor eat anything unclean. She must do everything I have commanded her." So basically, she's got to be a Nazirite for a while because the baby in her is a Nazirite. Manoah said to the angel of the Lord, "We would like you to stay until we prepare a young goat for you." The angel of the Lord replied, "Even though you detain me, I will not eat any of your food. But if you prepare a burnt offering, offer it to the Lord." Manoah did not realize that it was the angel of the Lord. Then Manoah inquired of the angel of the Lord, "What is your name, so that we may honor you when your word comes true?" He replied, "Why do you ask my name? It is beyond understanding." Okay, so he's like, you couldn't even understand my name or say my name or whatever. It doesn't make any difference. And why are you going to honor my name? Then Manoah took a young goat together with the grain offering and sacrificed it on a rock to the Lord. And the Lord did an amazing thing while Manoah and his wife watched. As the flame blazed up from the altar toward heaven, the angel of the Lord ascended in the flame. Seeing this, Manoah and his wife fell with their faces to the ground. When the angel of the Lord did not show himself again to Manoah and his wife, Manoah realized that it was the angel of the Lord. "We are doomed to die," he said to his wife. "We have seen God." But his wife answered, because she's probably smarter than him, "If the Lord had meant to kill us, he would not have accepted a burnt offering and grain offering from our hands, nor shown us all these things, nor told us this." The woman, so there's the verse that says no one can see God and live, and so he jumps right to the religious superstitious, and she's like, "He said we're going to have a son. Why would he kill us and then say we're going to have a son?" The woman gave birth to a boy and named him Samson. The word is derived from a Hebrew word meaning sun or brightness. He grew and the Lord blessed him, and the Spirit of the Lord began to stir him while he was in Mahanadan between Zorah and Eshtaol. Chapter 14. Samson went down to Timnah and saw there a young Philistine woman. When he returned, he said to his father and mother, "I've seen a Philistine woman in Timnah. Now get her for me as a wife." Okay, so he's growing up. He's supposed to be dedicated to the Lord. And one of the things is you don't marry foreign nations. You don't go marrying other nations. But he's also a prophetic object lesson of what Israel's doing and yet how Israel's going to be used anyway. So on the one side, there's the poetic application of who he is as Israel and how he's going to be used in the end, even though along the way he's totally whoring around with everybody. Anyway, so the father and mother replied, "Isn't there an acceptable woman among your relatives or among all our people? All of Israel. You got all of Israel to pick from. You got to, must you go to the uncircumcised Philistines to get a wife?" But Samson said to his father, "Get her for me. She is the right one for me." His parents did not know that this was from the Lord, who was seeking an occasion to confront the Philistines, for at that time they were ruling over Israel. Okay, so on the one hand, Moses says, don't intermarry with the nations. And then Samson all of a sudden has just got to have this Philistine woman. And the parents are like, well, this is not good. This is not good that a Nazirite who's sacred and set aside for the Lord wants to marry a Philistine, uncircumcised Philistine. But they don't realize that the Lord put it on his heart to want this and to do this, knowing that Samson's own flawed nature was going to be used by God to accomplish this. Samson went down to Timnah together with his father and mother. As they approached the vineyards of Timnah, suddenly a young lion came roaring toward him. The Spirit of the Lord came upon him in power, so that he tore the lion apart with his bare hands, as he might have torn a young goat. But he told neither his father nor his mother what he had done. Then he went down and talked with the woman, and he liked her. Sometime later, when he went back to marry her, he turned aside to look at the lion's carcass. In it was a swarm of bees and some honey, which he scooped out with his hands and ate as he went along. When he rejoined his parents, he gave them some, and they too ate it. But he did not tell them that he had taken the honey from the lion's carcass. Okay, so inside the bones, okay, you get it. Now his father went down to see the woman, and Samson made a feast there, as was customary for bridegrooms. When he appeared, he was given 30 companions. Okay, the 30 companions are friends of hers, brothers or cousins or whoever that are going to hang out with him and are kind of all the groomsmen for this wedding with her family. Let me tell you a riddle, Samson said to them. If you can give me the answer within the 7 days of the feast, I will give you 30 linen garments and 30 sets of clothes, which is a big deal. Clothes are a big deal. If you can't tell me the answer, you must give me 30 linen garments and 30 sets of clothes. Tell us your riddle, they said. Let's hear it. He replied, out of the eater, something is eaten. Out of the eater, something to eat. Out of the strong, something sweet. For 3 days they could not give the answer. On the 4th day they said to Samson's wife, coax your husband into explaining the riddle for us, or we will burn you and your father's household to death. Did you invite us here to rob us? Okay, so they think it's like a trick question, and that they're getting scammed, and they don't want to come up with 30 sets of clothes and 30 linen garments because it's not cheap. Then Samson's wife threw herself on him, sobbing, you hate me. You don't really love me. You've given my people a riddle, but you haven't told me the answer. Okay, that's just manipulation right there, and we start to see his how the Lord has wired him to not be able to handle women that are just going to pester and nag him. He says, I haven't even explained it to my father or mother, so why should I explain it to you? She cried the whole 7 days of the feast. So on the 7th day, he finally told her because she continued to press him. She, in turn, explained the riddle to her people. Okay, so she makes such a fuss that he finally tells her the riddle. And she tells it to the groomsmen, to the groomsmen. Before sunset on the 7th day, the men of the town said to him, what is sweeter than honey? What is stronger than a lion? Samson said to them, if you had not plowed with my heifer, you would not have solved my riddle. Meaning, you've been messing with my cow, because she's the only one that knows, and you shouldn't have been messing with my cow. So he right away knows that she's betrayed him, and he's ticked. Then the Spirit of the Lord came upon him in power. He went down to Ashkelon, struck down 30 of their men, stripped them of their belongings, and gave their clothes to those who had explained the riddle. Okay, so he didn't kill those guys. He went down to another Philistine city, killed 30 Philistines, took their clothes, and gave them to the guys that solved the riddle. Burning with anger, he went to his father's house, and Samson's wife was given to the friend who had attended him at his wedding. Okay, so they think he's abandoning her, he's just taken off, he's burning with anger, and he's going home. So we're going to go ahead and give her, we got a wedding planned anyway, so the guy who was his best man, the Philistine, whatever, we're going to give her to that guy. Okay, so we see he doesn't handle women well, he doesn't handle nagging very well, he's got a big anger problem, and he's got no problem killing Philistines. Later on, at the time of the wheat harvest, Samson took a young goat and went to visit his wife. He said, I'm going to my wife's room. But her father would not let him go in. Okay, they had the 7-day feast. By all rights, he should at that point be able to go into her room, his room, and consummate the marriage. But he took off because he was so mad. And then sometime later, we're not sure time-wise how many months passed, but there was some period of time. And then he's like, I want to go in my wife's room and have her. And her dad wouldn't let him. And the dad says, I was so sure you thoroughly hated her, he said, that I gave her to your friend. Isn't her younger sister more attractive? Take her instead. Samson said to them, this time I have a right to get even with the Philistines. I will really harm them. So he went out and he caught 300 foxes and tied them tail to tail in pairs. He then fastened a torch to every pair of tails, lit the torches, and let the foxes loose in the standing grain of the Philistines. So this is right before the grain harvest. You got big fields of grain. This is major staple, okay? Got to have lots of this. And so he ties the foxes together, puts a torch between the tails, lights the torch, and lets the foxes loose. And they're just going to fight with each other and pull and try and get away from the fire and take this all through the grain fields. He burned up the shocks and the standing grain together with the vineyards and the olive groves. When the Philistines asked who did this, they were told Samson the Timite's son-in-law, because his wife was given to his friend. So the Philistines went up and burned her and her father to death. Okay, now they're blaming it on her because they kind of see that Samson got wronged in this. Samson said to them, "Since you've acted like this, I won't stop until I get my revenge on you." Okay, so even though the Philistines are mad that their grain got burned up, which is just a really evil prank that Samson does on them to make them mad, they go kill his wife and her father. Okay, now he's really mad because he still wanted her. So he says, "Since you've acted like that, I won't stop until I get my revenge on you." He attacked them viciously and slaughtered many of them. Then he went down and stayed in a cave in the rock of Etam. The Philistines went up and camped in Judah, spreading out near Lehi. The men of Judah asked, "Why have you come to fight us?" They said, "We have come to take Samson prisoner," they answered, "to do to him as he did to us." Then 3,000 men from Judah went down to the cave in the rock of Etam and said to Samson, "Don't you realize that the Philistines are the rulers over us? What have you done to us?" He answered, "I merely did to them what they did to me." They said to him, "We've come to tie you up and hand you over to the Philistines." Samson said, "Swear to me that you won't kill me yourselves." "Agreed," they answered. "We will only tie you up and hand you over to them. We will not kill you." So they bound him with 2 new ropes and led him up from the rock. As he approached Lehi, the Philistines came toward him shouting. So he lets the men of Judah bind him up on the promise that they won't kill him themselves. They take him to the Philistines. He's walking toward the Philistines in ropes. The Philistines are running at him, yelling they want to get even. The Spirit of the Lord came upon him in power. The ropes on his arms became like charred flax. That's like the burnt wick of a candle. And the bindings dropped from his hands. Finding a fresh jawbone of a donkey, he grabbed it and struck down 1,000 men. So with this big old bone from a donkey as his weapon, he kills 1,000 guys. Then Samson said, "With the donkey's jawbone I have made donkeys of them. With the donkey's jawbone I have killed 1,000 men." He's probably singing while he's killing them. When he finished speaking, he threw away the jawbone, and the place was called Ramath Lehi. Because he was very thirsty, he cried out to the Lord, "You have given your servant this great victory. Must I now die of thirst and fall into the hands of the uncircumcised?" Then God opened up the hollow place in Lehi, and water came out of it. When Samson drank, his strength returned, and he revived. So the spring was called En-Hakkore, and is still there in Lehi. Samson led Israel for 20 years in the days of the Philistines. Okay, so now he's the general. He's in charge. He's the judge in charge of Israel, because he's been kicking some Philistine behind. One day Samson went to Gaza, where he saw a prostitute. He went in to spend the night with her. The people of Gaza were told, "Samson is here." Okay, so this is under Philistine control. The Gaza Strip, where you know it now, is right down against Egypt, but at the time it was under Philistine control. So, okay, never mind, you got a Nazarite with a prostitute, okay? He's, okay, anyway. Samson is here, so they surrounded the place and lay in wait for him all night at the city gate. They made no move during the night, saying, "At dawn we'll kill him." But Samson lay there only until the middle of the night. Then he got up and took hold of the doors of the city gate. Okay, he's in the city, in Gaza, which is a major city. They're expecting him to come out in the morning, and they're gonna roust him at dawn. He gets up in the middle of the night. The doors of the city are locked at night. So he grabs a hold of the doors of the city, rips them off their hinges. Together with, then he got up, took hold of the doors of the city gate, together with the two posts, and tore them loose, bar and all. So the bar across the doors, everything, rips it up. He lifted them to his shoulders and carried them to the top of the hill that faces Hebron. Sometime later, he fell in love with a woman in the valley of Sorek, whose name was Delilah. The rulers of the Philistines went to her and said, "See if you can lure him into showing you the secret of his great strength, and how we can overpower him so we may tie him up and subdue him. Each one of us will give you 1,100 shekels of silver." Okay, that's like a lot of money. The total amount paid by the 5 Philistines would have been equivalent to the price of 275 slaves at the rate offered for Joseph centuries earlier. Okay, which, inflation and everything. So that's a lot of money. 275, 300, 400 slaves. 1,100 shekels each times the 5 guys. So Delilah said to Samson, "Tell me the secret of your great strength and how you can be tied up and subdued." Samson answered her, "If anyone ties me with 7 fresh thongs that have not been dried, I'll become as weak as any other man." Okay, he's not talking about thong bikinis. He's just talking about leather straps, just so you know. "I'll become as weak as any other man." Then the rulers of the Philistines brought her 7 fresh thongs that had not been dried, and she tied him with them. With men hidden in the room, she called to him, "Samson, the Philistines are upon you." But he snapped the thongs as easily as a piece of string snaps when it comes close to a flame. So the secret of his strength was not discovered. Okay, he gives her misinformation. She uses it. They set a trap. Spring the trap. He just pops right out of them. Then Delilah said to Samson, "You made a fool out of me. You lied to me. Come now, tell me how you can be tied." Why are you giving her another second? Why are you talking to her for one more minute? She just betrayed you. Your enemy's trying to grab you. Now she's trying to guilt trip you and let you know how disappointed she is that you told her a lie that didn't get you trapped. And he still loves her. Okay, what kind of Delilah delusion you got to be under here? "You lied to me. Tell me how you can be tied." He said, "If anyone ties me securely with new ropes that have never been used, I'll become as weak as any other man." So Delilah took new ropes and tied him with them. Then, with men hidden in the room, she called to him, "Samson, the Philistines are upon you." But he snapped the ropes off his arms as if they were threads. Delilah then said to Samson, "Until now, you have been making a fool of me and lying to me. Tell me how you can be tied." He replied, "If you weave the 7 braids of my head into the fabric on the loom and tighten it with the pin, I'll become as weak as any other man." He had 7 long braids of hair because his hair had never been cut since he was born. I mean, like way longer than that. "I'll become as weak as any other man." So while he was sleeping, Delilah took the 7 braids of his head, wove them into the fabric, and tightened it with the pin. Again she called to him, "Samson, the Philistines are upon you." He awoke from his sleep and pulled up the pin and the loom with the fabric. Then she said to him, "How can you say I love you when you won't confide in me? This is the 3rd time you have made a fool of me and haven't told me the secret of your great strength. How can you love me?" What an idiot. And it says, verse 16, chapter 16, "With such nagging, she prodded him day after day until he was tired to death." Tired to death. Okay, I mean, endlessly poking and prodding, and what she's after is to get him killed. So he told her everything. "No razor has ever been used on my head," he said, "because I have been a Nazirite set apart to God since birth. If my head were shaved, my strength would leave me, and I would become as weak as any other man. Are you happy now? Shut up!" Okay, I added that last part. When Delilah saw that he had told her everything, she sent word to the rulers of the Philistines, "Come back once more. He has told me everything." So the rulers of the Philistines returned with the silver in their hands. Having put him to sleep on her lap, she called a man to shave off the 7 braids of his hair, and so began to subdue him. And his strength left him. Now, could he have still been strong without the hair? Or was it the complete and total disobedience and stupidity that made him weak? Was it giving in to the Philistine witchcraft and manipulation and control that weakened him? Or was it really the hair? He awoke from his sleep. Then she called, "Samson, the Philistines are upon you." Then he woke from his sleep and thought, "I'll go out as before and shake myself free." But he did not know that the Lord had left him. Then the Philistines seized him, gouged out his eyes, and took him down to Gaza. Binding him with bronze shackles, they set him to grinding in the prison. Okay, the grinding, they'd have an upper millstone and a lower millstone, and they'd put the grain in there, and then you'd go around in circles, grinding the grain into flour. And a lot of times you'll use mules or something, but if they got a prison, they'll just use the prisoners all day long, walking around grinding the grain. They set him to grinding in the prison. But the hair on his head began to grow again after it had been shaved. Now the rulers of the Philistines assembled to offer a great sacrifice to Dagon, their god, and to celebrate, saying, "Our God has delivered Samson, our enemy, into our hands." When the people saw him, they praised their God, saying, "Our God has delivered our enemy into our hands, the one who laid waste our land and multiplied our slain." While they were in high spirits, they shouted, "Bring out Samson to entertain us." So they called Samson out of the prison, and he performed for them. When they stood him among the pillars, Samson said to the servant who held his hand, "Put me where I can feel the pillars that support the temple, so that I may lean against them." Now the temple was crowded with men and women. All the rulers of the Philistines were there, and on the roof were about 3,000 men and women watching Samson perform. Then Samson prayed to the Lord, "O sovereign Lord, remember me, O God. Please strengthen me just once more, and let me with one blow get revenge on the Philistines for my 2 eyes." Okay, he's still not really doing it for Israel. He's still not doing it for God's glory. He's doing it to get revenge on him again. And yet, the Lord knows this is a guy that I can use, even though his motivation isn't quite right. I got him undercover by using his flaws. I got him in this place where in the middle of this big temple, in this middle of this big auditorium, there's 2 pillars that hold up the roof. And we found archaeologically that they really were built that way. That in the middle of a great room, there was 2 pillars within 5 or 6 feet apart. So Samson prays. Now, up to this point, he killed the 30 guys and took their clothes. He killed 1,000 guys with the jawbone of an ass. Maybe some other battles or whatever, but not that many people. Then Samson reached toward the 2 central pillars on which the temple stood. Bracing himself against them, his right hand on the one and his left hand on the other, Samson said, "Let me die with the Philistines." Probably pretty loud. Then he pushed with all his might, and down came the temple on the rulers and all the people in it. Thus he killed many more when he died than while he lived. Then his brothers and his father's whole family went down to get him. They brought him back and buried him between Zorah and Eshtaol in the tomb of Manoah his father. He had led Israel for 20 years. Okay? It doesn't say he led Israel until he got captured and went into prison. It seems that he was still leading Israel even while he was in the temple, killing at least the 3,000 on the roof, plus however many were inside the building. All the leaders and generals, all the aristocracy, all the heads of the whole thing. Decapitates the Philistine Empire that's been oppressing the Jews. And it happens because the Lord set about to release them after they repented for having chased all the foreign idols and everything else. And then they live at peace with God for a while. And then a new judge rises up. On one spiral, you really see how Israel was rebellious and selfish and vengeful and whoring around and falling in love with all the wrong things. Got their eyes gouged out. Can't see straight. Is under a red dragon. The religious Jews chasing the wrong things. But somehow in the end, when they repent, God could use them to do something awesome. Maybe that's the way the church is too. the institutional church and the system that we built that's whored around and got revenge and killed their enemies and burned people at the stake and whatever, but will have its head shaved, be humbled, have to grind the grain and do the humble job that mules should be doing, and then repent and be used by the Lord to straighten everything out at the cost of its own life. The martyrs in the last days that will give up their life to set things straight. You could say that the story of Moses is all hyperbole, that nobody could do that. God could never raise up somebody that could rip the gate of a city off its hinges and whatever. But I think the Lord can. And I think there's going to be people walking in the power of God. I've had people try to assault me. One guy was in a supermax prison when he was 14 for killing a cop. Was staying with us here for a while. And I said something that made him mad, and he wanted to pound me into pulp. And this is a guy that's got no problem with violence or guns or killing people or whatever. And he didn't open his mouth. He didn't say a word. Later on, I find out he's telling everybody, don't mess with Doug. I wanted to beat him senseless, and a big angel gave me a bear hug, and I couldn't even move my arms or open my mouth. Praise God. So, I don't know. I don't think supernatural strength is all that particularly supernatural. But in the story, we see God using a tremendously flawed vessel. And it's really beautiful. How the Lord got him into position, put him in undercover, used his own flawed nature, the pieces of him that didn't die, but in that last moment, he gets right with God and understands self-sacrifice. And even though he's doing it a little bit for revenge, the Lord's goal is accomplished, of freeing people from the grip of the Philistines. So, again, the word for this series of videos is simply that God is going to use flawed vessels. And they're going to do mighty things. And people look and say, how could God use somebody that flawed? Somebody vengeful. Somebody that's lust-driven and hiring prostitutes. Somebody that's whatever. I don't know. Who else is the Lord going to use? Where is he going to find somebody perfect? So, if we see the big picture, his parents didn't understand. God is in this. God is going to stir him up at the Philistines, and it's going to be one reason after another to get him all pissed, all wound up tight, so he can go whack the enemies of God, even though they're ruling over us. The rest of the men of Judah are like, dude, we can't make them mad. They're in charge of us. They're ruling over us. We got to be nice. We got to suck it up. We got to let them do whatever to us. He's like, no, it ain't right. It ain't fair. I just did to them what they did to me. He don't care. He's not scared of anybody. God's got to raise up some people like that. And they might have a pride problem, and they might be a little too annoying, and they might not be somebody you want to hang around with too much. But God's going to use them somehow. It's all part of the plan. Anyway, thanks for listening. Lots more at Fellowship of the Martyrs. We're going to continue the series and talk about some of these other guys that are mentioned in Hebrews, and you can judge for yourself whether you think they're great, righteous, amazing men of God or the same kind of flawed human vessels as everybody else you see as you're going through your day. That's all for now. Thanks for listening.